So today I'm going to talk about a topic that is being discussed in quite a number of platforms. The conversation around the global plastic treaty. This is quite topical. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the many conversations that are happening, or the many negotiations and discussions, and of course the pushback from industry. There are certain industries that are also pushing back in terms of enforcement of the global plastic treaty. But I think one of the things that must be very clear from the onset, what the treaty intends to achieve. In some cases, you hear people talking about the treaty as something that is coming to just have a blanket ban on the use of plastics. But I think it's not really the ban on the use of plastic. But of course, for me, from my understanding, from the reading of the text, it's probably an attempt to say, let's look at the entire value chain of plastic, and then we have to make sure that we have a binding agreement between parties, between all the players in the plastic manufacturing industry, to ensure that the pollution across the entire value chain, the pollution related to plastic across the different elements of the value chain, is addressed holistically. And I think addressing the issue of pollution is not necessarily saying there must be a ban on plastic, because this is just for me, I think it's a clarion call. It's something that is pushing industry, that is pushing everyone else to play a part, to have more innovations, for people to be more innovative, to come up with better solutions in terms of making sure that the production processes of plastic, they become they pollute less, they pollute within the thresholds that are acceptable. And I think with the various other problems that are caused by plastics, I think the idea or the ideal would be to ensure that all these processes that are being pursued are all intended to make sure that there is a sustainable management of the pollution. The pollution must be eliminated from all the aspects of the value chain. But of course, people then come and rush to say, let's have an alternative. Of course, it's quite nice, fashionable to be talking about alternatives. Yes, we really need an alternative to plastics because of the challenges. Yes, the scientific evidence and board of knowledge that is before us really is compelling for us to be talking about alternatives, for us to think differently. But I think one of the things for me, I'm a proponent of really establishing an alternative mindset before you bring an alternative product. Because when you bring an alternative product without an alternative mindset, or a mindset that is ready for the alternative product, you'll still be in the same problem that we are having. The problem that we are having with fossil-based materials, these materials that are manufactured from hydrocarbons, I think the biggest challenge that we have is not really probably it's something that we can have an argument about. We can have a discussion around that to say what is really the challenge. Because for me, I think one of the fundamental issues that we did not put in place when we discovered plastic as a superior packaging material was to really ask ourselves, do we have the systems in place to be able to handle the post-consumer materials? Post-consumption, are there systems in place to be able to handle that? And this is a conversation that must be done before a new product is introduced. So when you talk about alternative products or alternative materials, you can talk about biodegradable plastics. Yes, it's good to say that. But if we even look at the African context right now, you look at the biodegradable or organic materials that we are producing, which forms the bulk of waste generated in most countries in Africa. you realize that we are still having a lot of challenges in terms of addressing or managing that organic waste sustainably. So if we are going to introduce an alternative which is biodegradable and which is expected to be addressed the same way that the current systems we have are not able to comprehend the challenges that are posed by the organic materials that we have, then indeed we are actually calling for another problem that we are going to face in the near future. So for me, I think this conversation must not just be around banning plastic or, let's talk about the alternative. But I think we must then look at the challenges that we have in terms of the systems infrastructure-wise. Secondly, we must look at the human intervention, because I think the most central component or element to this conversation is us human beings. We have a role that we must play, and I think it's the change of the mindset. We must have a radical shift of our mindset. If we are able to ensure that we are able to sustainably manage our materials post-consumption, whether it's plastic, whether it's organics, whether it's any type of or form of material, we'll then have a different conversation when we talk about alternative products or alternative materials. Because if you are still having this mindset where people mix materials post-consumption, where we don't even care about separation of waste, when we don't even see the value in that, whatever type of material or alternative that is going to come, will still have serious challenges. So I think just from the face value of some of the propositions that are put forward in terms of having an alternative, which is your biodegradable plastics, I think it's a noble initiative. It's quite encouraging that already there are other places where here in Africa, even here in Zimbabwe, you will find biodegradable plastic. But the biggest challenge that we still have, and that we are going to continue having, is the role that the consumer must play in that equation, is the role that the manufacturer must play in that equation. So everyone has got a greater role to play. The consumer must take that considerable action. The consumer must ensure that after consumption, after utilization of these materials, you don't discard them, but you are able to deposit them where they are able to be utilized as a secondary resource in the secondary economy. And I think this is one key thing that must be done. Then secondly, the manufacturer also should take a role, a full responsibility of what they produce. Whether they are bringing in biodegradable plastics or they are still bringing the synthetic plastics that we have, they still have an equal role to play in the new alternative or in the current products that we are having on the market, which is the role to ensure that there are systems in place that are able to absorb all the materials that are being channeled into the environment as their products, as packaging of their products and things like that. So I think for me, the biggest thing, of course, people would then talk about the law of causation. I think it's quite an issue that a lot of people also raise to say we have to also look at it from a legal point of view to say if industry play their role in terms of bringing eco-friendly products that do not cause any harm to the environment, then there will not be any effect if a consumer discards materials into the environment. But I think it could be a lame excuse if people say that, because I think what we must all agree on is that all materials that somehow are produced they've got some elements, some chemicals that are also used in those products to make them durable, even and quite a number of other attributes that make industry utilize certain chemicals on products. And so if you have such a product, whether it's decomposable or it's not, you have to ensure that it is discarded or disposed of in a sustainable manner. So I think the conversation around who should take full responsibility is something that yes, we can have a discussion around that, but I think this is a shared responsibility where the industry plays a part to make sure that they also create stimulus in terms of activities that promotes recycling through probably extended producer responsibility, where they have resources that are channeled towards the establishment of infrastructure. They also have resources that also compensate the people who do the day-to-day recovery of their materials. And once that happens, and the consumers also play their part in terms of source separation of materials that they are using, then you realize that we'll be having a system in place that will be able to absorb whether a new product or an alternative product that will come on the market. Because if you talk about biodegradable plastics, with the view that it will be the disposal method or the treatment method will be biological treatment of that material, do we have the infrastructure to be able to handle that? So before we even talk about the alternative, we must talk about the end in the beginning. We must plan the end from the beginning. And if we do not do that, we will still have a problem that when we have the new alternative, this biodegradable plastic, it comes on the market, and we'll still have serious challenges in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of even a business case around its secondary use. So this is something that really needs to be discussed. There must be a serious conversation around that to ensure that we are able to establish the critical aspect, which is creating an enabling environment, which constitutes one, the alternative mindset, which will be able to handle the alternative new product or the alternative product. So these are the two critical things. The alternative mindset that will be able to handle the alternative product or materials that are going to be introduced. So I think this is basically these are my views, that anyone who wants to also challenge these views, you can also go in the comment section, just send your feedback, and I think we'll be able to have the discussion around that, because every view matters here on 360 Degrees Environmental Talk.